Hi, welcome to the Brandon Public Library's Youth Creative Writing for this fall 2020. My name is Julia. I'm the one facilitating the program this year. And the way we're working this fall is that every Saturday for the month of October, I'm posting a new video to our YouTube channel where we're going to talk about a youth creative writing concept. Then I will pose a challenge to you guys. You guys can write, send it to my email, and then at the end of the whole shebang, you guys get some prizes. If you haven't already, we do have a video from last week where we talked about fitting our 5 imagination questions all together to create our story and get our imagination going. This week, we are going to be talking about plot, which is very similar. It's all about putting our pieces together, making sure we have a cohesive story that all works together. So what exactly is a plot? Well, to put it quite simply, the plot is the way that the story is organized. It's a series of events that make up the story. If you think back to last week, plot is the what of those questions we asked when we were making up a story. The best part about plot is that once you know how to make it up, they're super easy to make. You probably already know how to do it already. Every story has something called conflict, which is the problem that the story's characters have to overcome or solve together. It's what makes the story interesting. A story without conflict is pretty flat and it's pretty boring. So there's 5 steps to creating a plot, all of which relate to the conflict in some way. They are called exposition, which is the beginning, rising action, the climax, falling action, and then the resolution, which is the ending of our story. So we're going to go through each one of these 5 points together. So our first plot point is called exposition, which is just a fancy word to say the beginning of a story. So this is where we are introduced to our character and our setting. We basically get to see the character in their natural habitat, doing their normal life, so that we know once the conflict is introduced, we see how much that conflict changes the story and how much the character has to overcome. So using an example such as the Cinderella story, the exposition would be looking at Cinderella's life before she goes to the ball. So this is when she is doing all the housework for her mean stepsisters and her mean stepmom. This is kind of their normal life, their status quo, nothing has changed yet. So our next step here is called rising action. This is where the conflict is introduced. A great example here for Cinderella is that she gets the invitation to go to the ball that the prince is hosting, but her stepsisters and her stepmom don't want her to go. And then that's the problem there, is her trying to get to the ball. So now we have climax, which is where our conflict is being addressed. This is where the story has reached such an important point where a lot of the time it's the point of no return. The characters' lives will never be the same after what happens at this point. There's a lot of tension. The audience doesn't know what's going to happen. For our Cinderella, this is the part where she is at the ball and she's having to run away because her dress and her shoes and her carriage are all turning back to what they were before. So we've now got what we call falling action, which is the second last step to our 5 points here. So this is where the main conflict has been dealt with and the characters start moving towards the end of the story. So we are working our way towards our ending, which means there might still be a couple little tiny problems pop up here and there. Great example for our Cinderella story is that this is when Cinderella is back to her house and the prince is searching for her across the kingdom after she left her shoe. So her stepmother is refusing to let her try on the shoe, but she does anyways. So that's a great example of a small little problem still happening in our falling action. So we finally have our resolution now, which is our last of the 5 points here. So this is where the conflict has been solved. Our characters are starting to go back to their homes, back to their lives, which probably look a little different now that they've gone on this super crazy adventure. So in the case of Cinderella, this is her happily ever after. She moves out of her home with her stepsisters and her stepmother into the castle of the prince, showing that her life has changed and that the conflict is now over. So I've pulled up a picture here to the side of me, which is called a plot graph. So we can actually put all 5 points of these plots on a graph, which is pretty cool. You can see each plot is at a different level and it'll connect to the next plot. And then we have climax at the very top because that is our most intense point that we have here. If you look at it, you can see it kind of looks like a mountain, which is another great way to describe our 5 plot points as well. So let's talk about that for a minute. So we have our exposition, which is the beginning of the mountain, the very ground. So this is where our lives are normal. We haven't started to climb the mountain yet. We are living our normal pre-mountain climbing lives here. Then as we start to climb, this is our rising action, and you can see the rising action working its way up to the climax. These are where we will again come across some problems on our way. So maybe we trip or we lose a shoe or we lose some rope. I don't know what kind of problems mountaineers have. Obviously, I haven't climbed a mountain except for a handy little plot mountain here. So after our rising action, we get to our climax, which is the very top of the mountain here. So this is a very important part, and it's also the hardest part because it was so high up. As we start to go down, it's our falling action, our trip down to the mountain. We've kind of overcome the peak, we've overcome the climax here. Still might be a couple little bumps along the way, but we finally make it to our resolution at the bottom again. So we are back to kind of a stable life, but again, things have changed because we just went and climbed an entire mountain. So this week, now that we've learned about plot, I want you to create your own plot diagram and write a story for it. So you can structure it just like the way our little plot mountain graph thing was on our last slide. So I want you to map out your 5 points, figure out what your exposition is, your rising action, your climax, your falling action, and then your ending, and then piece them together to make your own story. So how does it begin? What is their normal life? What are the problems they come across on the way to solving their problem? What's the big climax? What is it like on their journey home? And then what is their life like after their adventure? If you're having trouble coming up with some plots, don't worry. I've got 3 problems that I am going to have in these slides next to me right away. Make sure to pause so that you can see them for a longer amount of time. All right, so once you are done your writing, feel free to email it to me at julia@wmrl.ca. So you can either attach it as a document or you can put it in the body of the email. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just super excited to read your writing. So remember that when you participate, you do also get a prize at the end of our creative writing course this October. The more you participate, the better the prize. So make sure you are tuning in next Saturday morning and you get your writing from me this week to me before this Friday. All right, have a good weekend, guys.